of sex trafficking are males? What percentage?
70%.
Of human trafficking.
It typically involves young females being kidnapped from their homes and being sold into sex trafficking against their will.
What percentage of males are sex trafficked?
About 5%.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think the estimated value of sex trafficking is per year?
I'm guessing like 4.5 million.
What do you think the average age of a person trafficked is?
5 through 10.
How many girls are trafficked in Georgia?
1,000.
Living on the street end up in trafficking.
30%.
The average age of a person trafficked is?
68.
Each month in Georgia, how many girls are trafficked?
1,000.
What is human trafficking?
In my opinion, human trafficking is exploiting young girls to do things that are, number one, illegal, and mostly, number two, immoral.
Estimated value of sex trafficking is per year.
500 million.
Girls living on the streets end up in human trafficking.
I don't know, like maybe 7%.
Human trafficking.
Forcing people to do things they don't want to do.
Human trafficking is stealing little women and doing very bad things with them.
For 1 year, I was involved in prostitution. My ex-boyfriend, what I did as long as it was a beat. Later on, when we went to prison, he wrote me and told me he was being paid for me to sleep with his friends.
I was involved in prostitution to get drugs from the age 19 to 35. I was introduced to crack at the age 17 by my husband. He had been doing it behind my back, but eventually I was doing it behind his back, and that's when the sex came in because I didn't have the money to support my habit. So I was able to trade some sex for the drug or money. I'm very grateful God has delivered me from all drugs.
In order to pay the bills, I was involved in prostitution at age 24. In the process of voluntarily selling my body, I was also raped. Men saw it as okay because I allowed others to use myself for profit, so they were just stealing what others paid for.
I was 12 when I entered prostitution, and I was involved for it for 20 years. I come from an unloved family. I was always told I would never amount to nothing and no one would ever want me, so I turned to drugs instead.
Guatemala is a major hub for sex trafficking. In hundreds of bars, brothels, and hotels, 2,000 children are being sexually exploited around the country. There are currently very few laws protecting young children. Guatemala is the fourth largest exporter of children worldwide. At least 15,000 children are victims of sex trafficking at any given time in Guatemala. Betsy Barrett has been on 2 mission trips to Guatemala. She has worked with several young girls who have been sold into the industry by their families. She is very passionate about helping and mentoring the young girls victimized in Guatemala.
Did you know a lot about sex trafficking before visiting Guatemala?
Yes, because I worked with Allie in Atlanta sometimes when we would go and give food out to people on the streets. And I actually watched a exchange for food for a girl. And then so I decided to do some research into it, and I found out a lot about it before I went.
How many girls did you meet in Guatemala that were involved in the sex trafficking industry?
I am not sure. You would never know that they were trafficked because most girls there are, they look normal. They look like just every other girl that's staying beside them. But at night, we are not actually allowed in the landfill. And so I've never seen a transaction in Guatemala, but we do know there are several girls there who are.
From a teenage perspective, what are some signs we can look for in friends that could potentially warn us they are at risk of being in the sex trafficking situation?
Well, girls who are in the sex trafficking industry that do go to school and stuff, they look just like your average girl. They look like me and you, and some signs that you could look for are depression, because they're really reserved back because they're just depressed about their situation and what's going on. Some physical things that you can look for are bruises and scars, because their pimps will beat them if they don't meet a quotient for the night, and also if they look like they're hungry or if they look really skinny, because most of the time they deprive them of food to get them to go out there and get more customers for the day.
What can people our age do to help?
Something that we can do is really be aware of the situation and what's going on, because many people don't really know what sex trafficking is, and to know that it does happen in our area. It doesn't just happen in other countries like it does in Guatemala, but it also happens in the U.S. where we live. It happens down the road in Gainesville all the time. And I guess if you have a passion for it, act on that. Look up laws and talk to legislators and people involved in the law to look at changing some bills to make it easier for us to catch the pimps and keep the girls safe, and to volunteer at places that do have homes for the girls, because doing that it really helps the program, and because most of the programs are funded by the government, so they don't pay their workers. So it is a big help to go and help and to donate things to that fund, because most of their stuff is donated. They don't have a lot of money to buy the things to keep the girls.
Rahab's Rope is a nonprofit organization that sells jewelry and other novelties made by young women rescued from the sex trafficking industry in India. Our group was able to talk to the owner and founder, Vicky Moore, while visiting the store. Ms. Moore talked about many stories and experiences she has witnessed while serving in India. Ms. Moore started Rahab's Rope to give hope and opportunity to women and girls that are at risk or have been forced into the commercial sex industry. She went on to tell us how Rahab's Rope got its name. A biblical account of a prostitute by the name of Rahab made a rope that represented her rescue both physically and spiritually. It was a true honor to talk to a leader against the abolishment of the sex trafficking industry.
I've been involved in the act since I was 18 years old. I had a boyfriend and he made me do it, or he would hit me, so I did not have a place to go, so I did it.
I was 30 years old whenever I was involved in the act, and I just wanted to see if they could pay me for sex. When the state took custody of my children of ages 8.5 and 4.5, I started meeting men on the internet for sex. It was dangerous, it was careless, and it was stupid. Betsy?
I was forced into the act at age 24. I felt dirty, angry, and small.
Although there are some efforts to prevent and treat sex trafficking victims in Costa Rica, there is no efforts to search and rescue young women currently in the industry. There are laws in Costa Rica that requires a minimum of 6 years in jail if a person is caught involved in the prostitution industry. Although there are in fact laws in place in Costa Rica, they are rarely enforced. For this reason, Costa Rica is a major global hub for sex trafficking. Sydney Ure is a member of Lakewood Baptist Church that has devoted her life to helping. For this reason, Costa Rica is a major global hub for sex trafficking. Her and her husband are founders of Freedom Street, a ministry devoted to helping treat and bring independence to trafficked young women. They offer food, shelter, and other necessities to members of the industry. She keeps track of all her recent progress and projects on social media networks like Facebook.
I was involved in the act at age 18 for 3 months. I was forced to sell my body by my ex-boyfriend so that we would have money to live off of while we were on the run.
I became involved in the act at age 17. I did it for money, of course, and the money was mainly used to buy cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs.
My advice for young girls would be that you are more beautiful and precious to God to allow yourself to be involved in this act. Pray to be strong and believe in yourself.
Most people think kidnapping and trafficking only happens in movies and could never happen to them. But in California alone, 200,000 youths between ages 12 and 17 are trafficked each year.
Human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the world today, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. 55% of girls on the street end up in trafficking industry. 75% of the girls have a pimp. Often the girls are malnourished. 57% spend one day a month without food. Human trafficking is not just a developing country problem. Atlanta is in the top 14 in the nation for the highest children exploitation rate. Most girls are exploited within 24 hours of being on the street. Each month, between 300 and 500 girls are exploited. There are several federal laws that pertain to sex trafficking. Title 18, Section 1584 makes it a crime to force a person to work against her or his will, whether the compulsion is effected by use of force, threat of force, or threat of illegal coercion. Section 1581 similarly makes it illegal to force a person to work through debt servitude. Human trafficking relates to involuntary servitude, and slavery is prohibited by the 13th Amendment. Trafficking Victims Protection Act, passed in 2000, is the first comprehensive federal law to address trafficking. Law provides a three-pronged approach that includes prevention, protection, and prosecution. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act has been reauthorized in 2003, 2005, 2008, and 2013. Since 2000, to add more protection, prevention, and prosecution.
I really feel like human trafficking is a violation against someone's rights, where something is stolen from them, whether it's their innocence. I think human trafficking involves all different kinds of trafficking, but there's sexual trafficking, and for me, I feel like it's horrific, and I think that some people. It's interesting. I went to Thailand in college, and I don't really feel like I had an even idea of what sex trafficking was. I think I was really naive all growing up, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. But really, I learned about sex trafficking when I lived in Africa. Just hearing stories of people that had happened to there. I also spent some time with prostitutes in Africa, and so just I guess I learned personally through people. But then that's something that really bothered me or stirred something inside of me, and so I started doing research and reading books about it as well, just to learn some more facts instead of just my emotions about it, because it's something that makes me really angry. Statistics that Atlanta is the #1 hub in the United States for sex trafficking. I've heard that. I think when you grow up in a place like Gainesville, you might see a homeless person, but depending on where you go, that's not something you see, and so that's hard, I think, for us to imagine in our heads. And so I really wanted to know, realistically, is that true? And so I found this ministry in Atlanta called Out of the Darkness, and what they do on Friday nights, a certain Friday a month, they go and they give roses to prostitutes. And there's this area in Atlanta that they just line up on the side of the road, and police just drive right on by because they're more concerned about drugs than people's lives, which baffles my mind. And so these women, some of the women that they give the roses to are trapped in, and some are there by choice. So that's one part of their ministry, but also part of their ministry is on Saturday mornings they actually go to the houses where these women live and hang out with them and talk to them. And I have participated on the Saturday morning event, and I went, the last time I went, it was in January. We, one house in particular that stood out, kind of brought food to the different apartments, and they really live in squalor. It was cold, they didn't have heat. The house that we went into, there was 2 women in there who were prostitutes in the sex industry, and there was probably around 10 kids in that house, and the one woman was pregnant. And they were sleeping when we got there because they had worked the streets the night before, and the kids were just running around. It was utter chaos. The that's really hard for me to see because it hit home that it's not something that, you know, like when we go to Guatemala and you hear stories in Guatemala about, you know, this little girl who won't wear dresses because she's afraid to attract attention from men because her parents traffic her out to the people in the neighborhood. Like, you hear those stories and you hug that girl, but there's something about it when it's happening here in your home. Like, this is my home, and how dare people traffic out girls and violate them. And then you think about, too, like, on that road, it's like, I think I used to think that the men who buy the girls are like these creepy men, you know, that are fat and like greasy. It's businessmen. It's people like your dads, or your doctors, or whatever, that are using those women and violating those women. And I mean, I know women do it too, but so that is something that is a different mindset too. I think we think of evil people doing that, but it's like everyday people that are involved in that as well. And I think along with the sex industry and trafficking, every time boys or girls, they look at pornography, you're giving to human trafficking is really what you're doing. And so, just another thought. Of against human trafficking is being aware of it, of the issue, of what's going on in the world. I think, just being aware is a huge thing. I think there are places that you can serve and get involved. I know that, you know, this Out of the Darkness one, Atlanta, there's so many different opportunities if you just do a little research of ministries you can get involved with to help. I think choosing not to look at pornography is one way you help because you won't support the business. I think also by praying for those women and praying for their recovery. I know really close by, I forgot the name of the town, but there's a place called Wellspring. I think it's Wellspring Living. It's a safe house for women that come off of the streets, and they counsel them and they do activities with them and they rehabilitate them. So getting involved in a place like that, or financially giving, that's huge as well. So I think human sex trafficking in general is something that fighting against it has momentum. I think there comes a point where you make a choice to help or not help, and there comes a point in your life where you choose to do something. I think that's the first step.
The Wellspring Living programs for girls ages 12 through 17 includes 11 to 13-month program that puts survivors of domestic minor sex trafficking through therapy, education, and life skills classes. There are 15 beds currently available in this program. The Empowered Living program is for women ages 17 to 22 and involves an 11 to 13-month program that offers therapy and life skills training to build independence. There are 11 beds currently in this program. The Wellsprings Living launched the White Umbrella campaign to educate people around the nation about sex trafficking. Since 2012, the White Umbrella campaign has traveled over 5,000 miles to teach 3,000 people about the prevention and the treatment of sex-exploited women in the United States.